Next up, we're thrilled to welcome Darren Chittick, another first-time person. And Darren, I wrote down next to this that you're both in Cincinnati and in Indianapolis. And there's an entire possibility you're in neither. Which one are you in?
Indianapolis.
All right, you see, at least I got half of it right. So anyway, you're
And
very welcome.
they're nearly the same, aren't they?
Well, from here, yes, indeed. I've never been to either. So for people who've been attending 10 by 9 via Zoom for the last number of months, Darren is usually to be seen knitting magnificent things, making me jealous as I see his progression. There you are, check it out. But tonight he is not knitting for all of the 10 by 9 because he's telling us his first story for 10 by 9. So Darren Chittick, please take it away.
In my early 20s, I saw an attractive man at a gay bar, and so, as I generally would do, I immediately left. About a block away from the bar, I thought to myself, this is why you never meet anyone. You're a coward. About another block down the street, I parked the car and walked the blocks back to the bar, sat down next to the rather attractive man and said hello. About the same time, he passed a note on a piece of paper across me to the woman on the other side of me, which I thought was quite curious until I realized that he was deaf. This is what an act of random bravery will get you, I decided. We ended up spending about 6 hours together that evening and became very good friends. It had been the first time that he'd ever been in a gay bar, and he was the first deaf friend that I ever had. And so we would often joke that he taught me American Sign Language and I taught him how to be gay, but none of the fun parts. That act of random bravery eventually led me to becoming an American Sign Language interpreter. And shortly into that career, I began working with a young deafblind girl who was in kindergarten at the Indiana School for the Blind. I worked with her as a deafblind support service provider, as we are known professionally, and her name was Kylie. I worked with her for a number of years, and because her mother already knew sign language when Kylie was born, her first language was tactile sign language. And so I would hold her hands and sign to her, and she would sign back to me, and that's how she communicated. I worked with her in the classroom from about 8 in the morning until 3:30 or so in the afternoon. And then for a time, I also did respite work with her, meaning that she stayed with me for a couple to several hours in the evening after school. She was a joy. She was exhausting. She had enough vision to escape any room that she found herself in, and she had absolutely no fear. She would be out the door before anyone noticed, and sometimes would make it all the way across campus and into another building before we would catch up with her. It was harrowing work, and the respite hours were sometimes the most harrowing. On one particular afternoon, extra tired from the day, I decided to stop for a coffee, and at the counter asked her what she would like, giving her a few options. And she indicated she would like some apple juice and a candy. And so we got those items and made our way to a full-sized overstuffed couch. And she did the strangest thing I had ever seen her do. She reclined on the couch with her head on the arm, drank her juice, ate her candy, and lay there with her legs crossed at the ankle on my lap. This had never happened. I decided that we might, in fact, just stay there on this couch until they closed if she would remain still like this for that much time. So unique was this moment that when her mom entered and saw the scene, she burst into tears asking, how did I make this happen? And I assured her I had done nothing and that we would never question it and that we would enjoy it as long as it would last. And so that became our daily habit after school. The calm that we experienced on that first night did not continue as I might have hoped, but it was a good space for us. Kylie was very interested in people, and because her vision was so limited, she would often climb up into the laps of strangers so that she could see their faces. She also happened to love tattoos, which I imagine stemmed from the fact that she could see the contrast of ink on skin quite clearly, and so she would spend much time exploring them if given the chance. Her best friend at the coffee shop quickly became a man who had flames tattooed at both of his arms, was always working on a laptop while wearing large headphones, and who was called Diablo, not his given name. He was, contrary to what the tattoos and chosen name might imply, incredibly patient and gentle, and he liked Kylie just as much as she liked him. It turns out that the computer work he was doing was post-production mixing of music. He was both a musician and a producer. And as it turned out, he and I became friends right alongside his developing friendship with Kylie. His girlfriend was somehow a distant cousin of my then sister-in-law. It's a small world. As with all things, both that job and the friendship ended. I didn't see Diablo for many years until one afternoon I spotted him walking down the hallway of an office building. He was wearing nothing but a black satin robe with a red dragon on the chest and a pair of fluffy slippers. The office building happened to also house an art school. I was interpreting classes there, and he was working as a model for a life drawing class. It was always easier to get him out of his clothes than it was to keep him in them. So this was no surprise to anyone that he had made this choice. We reconnected and we saw each other a couple of times over the following months, and then nothing much came of it. You know how that goes. Then one morning I awoke to find a series of text messages from him left in the wee hours of the night. His girlfriend had broken up with him, and he just didn't know what he was going to do. And could we get together the next day? Of course. And so we made plans for that afternoon when I would be done with work, and with plans I already had for drinks with a teacher from the same art school where I'd met him. At 4:00 in the afternoon, I was quite buzzed from 1.5 mojitos. I am a lightweight. I was only a block from where he was having dinner with a friend of his. Could I meet them at the restaurant? Sure. I thought it was odd that he was just having a casual dinner with a friend because he had been so distraught just a few hours before, but time heals all wounds, it seemed. The friend was someone from his mixed martial arts gym, had on a tank top, very impressive biceps, and was named Frank. Still tipsy, I leaned over to Diablo and said in a louder than intended voice, "Kevin has really nice arms." Diablo responded, "Yes, Frank does have really nice arms." At some point during dinner, straight mixed martial artist big-armed Frank revealed that he was actually gay mixed martial artist big-armed Frank. Well then, I'd been flirting with an actual gay man I found attractive. What a time to be alive. The three of us retired to Diablo's house, lazed about on the patio, and then a young woman Frank and I had never met nor heard of showed up and took Diablo with her. Time had evidently healed the wounds to a greater degree than I had earlier imagined. Frank and I went inside, because we were enjoying each other's company. I learned that he had, in fact, heard a lot about me and knew that he was being introduced to someone. He learned that I knew nothing of him and was mostly surprised at every turn. Then he got out a huge binder of DVDs that he had brought with him and told me how much he loves Doctor Who. And did I also love Doctor Who? And I said, "Oh, yes, I love Doctor Who." And so we spent the evening with Chris Eccleston's Doctor. And that was the last time in all the 11 years that I've known my husband that I lied to him.
Oh, fantastic. There are so many delicious little turns and corners in that magnificent story, Darren, that it was interesting to figure out which ones. How about all these lovely people you mentioned? Are you in touch with some of them still? Obviously, with your husband.
Some of them.
Beautiful.
It's been lovely.
That's magnificent.
And Frank especially, who's not Kevin.
I was speaking at a thing once a few years ago, and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, will you sign my book?" And I said, "Sure, sure." And she said, "You'll remember my name because we were in the toilet queue last year." And I was like, "Oh my God." And then I just decided to pretend that I had remembered her name, but that it was a very sophisticated name with a complicated spelling, maybe Welsh or something. And I said to her, "Just remind me quite how you do spell that because I don't want to get it wrong." And with icy lips, she said, "P-A-M." And she despised me, and she took my book as if I'd spat on it, or took her book as if I'd spat on it. Anyway,
right before we walked out to get married, I had warned Frank that I was going to hand him a note to read that was going to be very meaningful. And I wanted to warn him so that he could enjoy it and not just feel frustrated that he'd not done the same. And so he wrote me a note, and we read them on opposite ends of the building before we walked in. And so we walked in and he's crying because I've written the sweetest note ever. And I have no idea what his note said because he signed it XOXO Kevin.